Hey guys, got a interesting, fun Friday episode for you today. I'm going to talk about cutting off your scrotum sack. Cutting off your scrotum sack. No, not really. You'll hear once we get started. There's some interesting stuff. Should you cut off your genitals for the good of the environment? We'll talk about it. You can, as always, subscribe to my YouTube at Taylor Space Stutch, Taylor Space Stutch, Stuch. Follow me on my website, tstutch.com. Follow me on Twitter, tstutch1, and email me at tayradio1@gmail.com. And thank you, and enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Are you ready for a Super Beta Max Friday episode extravaganza? I hope you are, because I'm going to talk about cutting off our nutsacks for climate change. Yes, it sounds hyperbolic, because maybe it is a little hyperbolic to think about grabbing that fleshy, hairy sack that hangs right below the penis, taking that and snipping it right off. But just think about it for a second. If you were to do that, if you were to snip those balls right off, you couldn't have any more kids. And would it be good for the environment? Well, I often rant and rave about these radical left-wing loonies. Well, I don't often, but I do it enough. Rant about these left-wing lunatics that want to destroy society and do all kinds of weird shit. So, it's quite a pain in the ass to deal with them. Well, let me tell you something, my fellow listeners, that there is an article that has been surfacing around Twitter about a guy who got a vasectomy for the environment. Okay, so I know it's not the equivalent of cutting your nuts off. I get that. But it's close enough, right? You know what I'm saying? If you've had a vasectomy, don't worry. I'm not saying that you're nutless. But you did have your nuts cut. So, anyway, this guy is the biggest puss beta bitch that you could imagine. I'm just going to read a little bit of this article and make fun of it as I go. So, it starts off, I got a vasectomy because of climate change. Getting one was, by far, the most powerful personal action I could take for our planet, says the little cuck bitch boy. He says, I've always struggled to combine the idea of personal responsibility with the overwhelming need for human society to address the threat posed by climate change. Since at least the 1970s, massive energy corporations responsible for the vast majority of our carbon emissions have known about and done nothing to mitigate the harm. Okay, whatever. So let's skip ahead. So he says, when I got engaged, my fiance, my goodness, can't believe he got engaged. How could such a beta cuck get engaged? When I got engaged to Virginia, I started planning for the future. It wasn't just my dog Wiley and me against the world anymore. All of a sudden, I started thinking 10 to 20 or more years ahead. Wow. You know what? I'll tell you what. Just reading this so far, I'm only on the second or third paragraph. He's brave. And he is thoughtful. Just like Children are an obvious thing to play in. With a sudden focus on responsible decision making, it no longer made sense to leave hypothetical future offspring to chance. When should we have them? Who'd be responsible for staying home and raising them? Could we just have one of the dogs do that? Oh, haha, so funny, fucking idiot. We got engaged in June 2018, a couple months before a wildfire destroyed an entire town in California, and another one wiped out sections of Malibu. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Shortly after, most of the Mississippi River basin flooded, virtually eliminating the future for industrial agriculture throughout the region. God, this guy's a fucking idiot. Is this a world we want to bring kids into? Is this a world? Is this a world it's responsible to bring kids into? Jesus Christ. So, um, he continues talking and eventually comes down to saying, so we're not having kids. I found a colleague's brother here and he snipped off my balls. It might not have been enough to save the polar bear, and it might not prevent the next key absolute biggest difference we can make. We need fewer humans, and getting there voluntarily will be an awful lot less painful than doing it with war, famine, and natural disaster. Jesus, man. Oh my God, this is sick. Sickening. You know, so first off, the stuff he brings up about the wildfires, the wildfires are probably not related to climate change. Um, they're probably not. Everyone, you know what? It's so frustrating to me because people immediately attach a cause to something that they actually don't know about. It has, they were talking about how one of the electric companies up there in California was responsible for one of the wildfires. The other thing is this is people are fucking around in the woods, they're doing shit, and maybe some idiots are causing the fires on purpose. I don't know. But to just say, oh, climate change. Oh, it's hot today, honey, climate change. You know what's so funny? You know what's hilarious? Is climate change fucktards will tell you, so say we have a cold winter in Texas, and they go, oh, psh, well, you just because it was cold this winter, that means that it actually is climate change, right? That doesn't actually disprove it. Or they'll say something like, just because you had a cold day today doesn't mean that the earth is not warming, right? Oh, just because you had a cold winter doesn't mean the earth is not warming, right? That's what they'll say. Meanwhile, you've got idiots like this that say, oh, well, there was a flood, so climate change. There was a fire, climate change. Do you see the hypocrisy there? Do you see the retarded double standards? I've already talked about what I think about climate change. I don't particularly think that there's a lot of convincing evidence that we are causing a global climate warming cycle. That being said, I do agree with Taleb's approach to systemic risks. So if we run the risk of our activities affecting the whole planet negatively so that we would die, that is something we want to look at, obviously. It's not, we want to proceed with caution, with the utmost caution. And then this guy talking about the polar bears. I don't even think the polar bears are in danger. I think that's just a myth. I'm kind of talking out my ass, but let's check it out. Are polar bears endangered? Let's use the old trusty Google. But, is Google even that trustworthy anymore? Polar bears, it says vulnerable. Population decreasing, but they're not endangered. So, and the thing is that everybody sees those fucking pictures of polar bears on a block of ice hanging around in the ocean. And it's like, dude, they're fine, dude. The polar bears are fine. And who cares about the polar bears anyway? I don't give a shit. All right, so let's get some sponsors and I'll be right back. So what I think is also interesting about this article is how the guy says, we need fewer humans. We need fewer humans, and getting there voluntarily will be an awful lot less painful. So that's an interesting statement. And I think that I don't agree with this. There is a large group of people in the industrialized world that believe that we need population control. And what's funny about population control is that when I was in college, I went down to some conspiracy theory rabbit holes about population control and all of this. And at the time, I thought it was kind of like a wild deal. I thought it was like, oh yeah, well, I thought for a little while I did get sucked into the conspiracy theory stuff. But then I kind of jumped out of it and I'm like, well, I mean, are they really going? Is there really people that want population control, or is this kind of like an emergent thing? So what I mean by emergent is in the industrialized world, we are because of things like prolific birth control, like the pill and condoms, and also abortion and stuff like that. We have in other countries, not just the U.S., but like we have significantly reduced our birth rates. Like in Europe, there's a lot of countries that are not having native populations be able to replace their birth rates. And in the U.S., like we're having an issue. In parts of Asia, they're having a problem. And so like we all know China and Japan. And basically, there is definitely a phenomenon where a lot of industrialized countries the people are not having kids. It's almost like we're going extinct. And in addition to that, I thought, okay, that was just an emergent behavior. And what I mean by that is it just happened. Like it wasn't planned. Nobody wants it to happen. But then, and I get it, this one dude's article doesn't prove that. This is a guy, Wes Slur, aka Beta Bitch Cuck. And this guy doesn't prove that there's a conspiracy, but there is a growing faction of people who do intentionally want to decrease the population of the earth. And and it's so fascinating to me because, well, there's a couple reasons. One reason is because, in my opinion, the only reason that we should worry about the earth is because we're on it, right? Like, I don't care about the environment if everyone's dead. If there are no people on this earth, I don't give a fuck about the earth. I don't care. Like if I was the last person on earth and somebody said, hey, if you don't build a house, then, or if you don't, take care of your garden, then the whole earth is going to perish because you didn't take care of your garden. But I'm the last person on earth. I'd say, I don't give a shit, dude. I don't give a shit if this stuff lasts when I'm gone, right? Especially if there's no hope of humans arising again, I don't care. The only reason that I think that we should even give a shit about the environment for the most part is because we're in it, right? So it makes sense that, okay, you don't want to have runaway anything, any kind of runaway pollution situation or any kind of runaway global warming, not because of, the deer is going to die, but because if the deer dies and then it causes a systemic problem with other creatures that rely on deer, then that might be a problem for humans. That's the fucking issue. And you've got all of these people that, and it makes you think about the abortion and not only that, but, I go off about feminism and stuff, but obviously in reality, I actually think, I believe in personal decision making and freedom. And so if a woman wants to have her career and do all this stuff, I don't have a problem with that. But I do think that the idea of women dedicating their lives to a career as opposed to having a family, I do think that is also partially due to they call it antinatalism, which is people that don't want to have kids, not that don't want to have kids, that don't want other people to have kids. They want to see the Earth's population shrink. And I think there's a lot of that behind the environmental movement. And it's hard to know if these people actually care. So I think, Scott Adams made a really good point today. People were talking about the impeachment stuff because a lot of this impeachment stuff it's all just a big sham. And there was some prominent figure made a statement that was clearly not true. And somebody underneath it, Scott Adams was like, I'm pretty sure he doesn't believe his own bullshit. And there was a small conversation that ensued where it was like, basically Scott Adams pointed out, and I think correctly, that there's brainwashers and the brainwashed. So the brainwashers are convincing everybody, hey, we need to reduce the human population for the good of the environment. And then the brainwashed don't even realize what's happened to them. And they go and carry out the orders from on high, just like a pawn. And I think that's what we're seeing across the country with the socialism movements, with the anti-white movements, with the toxic masculinity movements. I think all of that is tied into I think all of that is related to a structure where you have whoever is deciding to propagate this nonsense is doing a very good job. And as a result, once you get the information in people's heads, all you need is a trigger, and people just start acting out what you've taught them and showed them. And that seems to be what's happening here in the US about climate change and cutting off your nuts. So I would say if you are worried about the environment, don't worry about not having kids. There's other ways to do it. I think the best way to do it is technology. Of course, I'm not an expert and I don't really know what I'm talking about, but don't cut your nuts off for the environment, dude. And, subscribe to my YouTube, Taylor Stutch, Taylor Stutch, Stuch. Email me at tayradio1@gmail.com. Follow me on my website, tstutch.com, and Twitter, tstutch1. Thank you.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.